Thank you, everybody, for tuning into I, the Show, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything. I'm Katie.
And I'm Brady, and today we're talking about heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana. Actually, no, today's episode is not about drugs. That's just a list of chemicals that releases dopamine in your brain. Something my drug of choice, and the subject of today's episode, music, is very good at.
And before we dive into that topic, which is one of my favorites, how was your week?
Well, it was a scary week, actually. We had to take my infant in to get a COVID test.
Oh my gosh.
It did come up negative, and it turns out he just had baby herpes, which is actually herpes 6. I can't remember the exact name of the virus, but it was basically just a rash that he had to fight off, and it gave him a fever. So
2020, herpes is better than COVID?
Absolutely,
There
yes.
we go.
Yeah.
I'm glad he's doing better, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Now his fever finally broke yesterday, and he's just a big ball of energy now.
So no sleep for you?
I haven't slept in 3 days.
Ah, the life with an infant. The good old days.
Yeah. But luckily, sleep deprivation provides very good podcast content.
Well, then I should be a rock star then, because I have sleep deprivation from a different reason. I had to put in hay this week.
Hay is for horses.
Well, actually, it's for cows, too. But anyways, beyond even putting in hay this week, I also had to, organize an entire beach party, paddle boat a child with an inner tube behind me across an entire lake 3 times. I mean, there's so much tired here. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
I'm
North
barely
Idaho
awake.
life.
Yeah.
And speaking of life, we want to hear from you listeners. I encourage you to go to our Twitter, @GoITheShow, go to our Facebook page, or just go to the comment section of YouTube and leave us your juicy comments. We really want to do commentary on those if they get pretty good.
And if they're dramatic, even better, because our feelings don't get hurt easily.
Yeah, and, I know on YouTube people love to just fight each other in the comment section, and I definitely want to see more of that if possible.
WWF commentary, bring it.
Yeah, just don't be too rude. Let's keep it within the terms of service.
Please, people, I want coffee and commentary. Make it rain.
Yeah, also, if you could send us free coffee, that works too.
Oh yeah, we'll give you a total plug.
Just not Starbucks, please. That's like the worst one. Yeah, I don't want no Ventis.
Macchiato. Maserati.
No Ferrari.
Ooh, Lambo.
Rambo.
Coffee with a kick.
Coffee with a pow.
Punch to the face.
Roundhouse. Now that we've derailed this crazy train,
I think it's time for I Digress.
so what's your favorite kind of music, Katie?
Can I say all of it and be really lame and generic? I mean, I really do love all music, though. I'm not going to lie. What about you?
Even Drake?
Well, I like the memes.
Yeah. Meme format of the year 2020, probably.
Exactly.
Not my personal favorite, but it seems pretty popular.
Well, and I mean, to be honest, if something's got a catchy beat, I'm not going to say I don't enjoy it. It's just, there are certain genres of music that I like better than others.
Yeah.
I really do enjoy more of guitar-driven things. It's
Yeah,
probably
me
my favorite.
too. Hard guitar music, I believe, is the overarching term for the genre.
There we go.
Rock and roll, hard rock, heavy metal, all of the thousands of subgenres of metal.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of more my cup of tea.
Really? Well, I mean, you do kind of have a background in that. You should probably let us know about it.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get into too much of specifics because the bands I was in are no longer a thing at all, but I was in a couple metal bands. We did play hundreds of shows live at, some various venues around Spokane, Washington. I never really progressed from there. We were going to go on tour with a nice famous kind of parody metal band called Psycho Stick. We did a battle of the bands, a local battle of the bands to kind of win that opportunity. And unfortunately, recently after that, our drummer decided to lose his mind and move to the south to go do some coal mining or something. So he quit the band and we couldn't really replace him, and so kind of everything just kind of fell apart after that, and we just were no longer a thing. And after that, I never really picked myself back up to join any other bands. I started just working more, making more money.
So you kind of became a productive adult, in a way, that whole lame take the trail off the dreamland type sort of thing. Because I've noticed that happens. I was a part of a band too. I think it's almost like a rite of passage for a lot of people. We did a couple shows, and honestly, we're gonna go off into a different realm here. But I was part of a worship team that sang and did stuff every Sunday. So that's where the background of my music education came from. Is I guess I don't know. I sang every week. That was my thing. I loved it.
That's awesome. That's actually kind of how I started out. Was when I was in youth groups, various youth groups. Actually, I think I was in 3 of them.
Dang.
But I was playing guitar in like the worship band for all three of those. I was not good at all by any means.
Terrible.
But I mean, we were just up there doing it just for fun, mainly, to worship the Lord or whatever back then.
And then you went metal?
And then I went metal, yes.
Talk about taking the train off.
Yeah, I don't exactly know how I dove into it. I think Guitar Hero had a lot to do with that. I got the Guitar Hero game. And I just got a couple of the songs on there just really spoke to me for some reason. It really tickled my fancy, if you will, and got me really into metal. This is a song called 6 by All That Remains and Laid to Rest by Lamb of God. Those were kind of my introduction to the genre. And then I started hanging out with my older brother. He was 12 years older than me. So growing up, I didn't, spend a lot of time with him. He was off doing his own older brother things.
Okay.
But he came to me one day and asked if I wanted to buy his guitar. And I couldn't turn it down. Like, I had been saving money all summer from mowing lawns and stuff at the time. I think I was 17 or 16. And once I did that, he offered to, teach me kind of more advanced things on the guitar. Like I said, I was only playing in worship bands, so we were playing like your basic chords.
G, E minor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, over and over and over again. Yeah.
And so he offered to teach me more advanced things, but he was really into metal, like the obscure stuff, like death metal and black metal and stuff like that. So with those kind of genres, they employ a lot more advanced techniques than your standard worship band or even like your standard rock and roll band. So I kind of just went hard in the paint for a while there, and some of the music he listened to it was so cool, like the aesthetic of it.
Really?
And it was just, I don't know, for whatever reason it appealed to me, and then I dove right in, and I'm still into it to this day. I don't like as much of the obscure stuff anymore. It just feels gimmicky.
Well, I wonder if that's something you bring up. I feel like there's so many more genres of music now than even when I was a kid. And I don't know if the internet has something to do with that, but it is just, there's something for everybody now.
Oh, absolutely.
And I feel like sometimes people are just making up stuff so they can be that one genre of weirdness for those 5 people that like it.
Well, look at Weird Al. I mean, he made a career out of that.
That is true, yeah.
And that's an older reference. There's so many more doing it now just because of YouTube.
Sound bites, right?
Yeah, sound bites. That's something I really want to talk about, too, is YouTube.
Streaming.
Not just YouTube. There's a lot of streaming services. But I think before Spotify and before your iTunes really became popular, and I think right around the time of pirating was a huge thing, YouTube, everybody would go to YouTube to stream their music. True. I think it's a major part of the adpocalypse that YouTube had. Because of how popular music videos were. And not just music videos. People will just pop the picture of an album cover on there and put the whole album or just, a song, make a playlist of the album. So basically you could just go listen to any album for free on YouTube. And to this day you still can. You're just going to be riddled with ads.
I know. People are still fit-throwing about the ad thing. But you think about it. Somebody took the time to make that music. And I feel like those people need to get paid. So when someone throws that album up and slaps the album cover on it, it is theft.
Yeah.
I mean, we all love getting to listen to the music, and honestly, there's that whole debate about if you give someone something for free, you'll actually make money because people will seek you out to find more things.
Yeah.
And so you have to monetize in a different way, and I think that's a topic you wanted to talk about was streaming, like how it's changed music and how our lives are different because of it.
Yeah, streaming completely changed the entire industry of music. We should actually back up a little bit, rewind.
Okay, I like rewinding.
I do want to talk a little bit about the history of mediums that the music is stored on because it directly ties into how the industry changed.
Are we going to talk about 8 tracks?
Yeah, we can a little bit.
My grandpa
yeah.
had one of those.
I'm not really very knowledgeable about 8 tracks because it was it was kind of like the Betamax of music mediums.
It was a totally short time frame.
Like,
but
yes, it was functional. It just wasn't that popular. The players were a little more expensive to make and... But anyway, I digress.
Sorry, I was just thinking as a little kid, my grandpa had a Camaro with burgundy interior, and anybody that likes to play with Legos is going to love 8 tracks because you just slam that thing in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like put the square in the hole.
There's something very appealing about
satisfying.
I think maybe it because of the nostalgia glasses of it.
It probably is.
If that were to be employed today as a viable medium, we would not.
Oh, if you think people throw fits about ads, can you imagine if everybody had to go back to 8 tracks?
Yeah.
They'd throw them at people.
Well, if they did employ those kind of mediums today, they would have ads on the 8 tracks.
We can also do a whole I digress right there because retro is in. People are buying reel-to-reel cassette players just to do the mono sound. I know, but okay, sorry. Anyway, so
no,
mediums.
It's okay. Before we rewind and talk about the history, the first thing, well, one of the first things was vinyl records, and because of what you just said, that has, for whatever reason, made a comeback, especially in the metal scene. I do not understand this phenomenon. I am on a lot of Facebook groups that we talk about metal bands and stuff.
Okay.
And between all the death metal groups, the regular generic, I guess you'd call it boomer metal groups, talk about Metallica and all that, and like the more modern like
Boomer
metal, like the Gent and stuff like that. All these three different groups, they're all obsessed with vinyl records now. They're all taking pictures of their Amazon order when it comes in of the new vinyl record of this band they like. I don't understand why that made a comeback. To this day, like, I don't want to get too nerdy on the audio technology side of it.
But I like nerds.
But like vinyl it has a particular sound to it. And some of these people buying them, they weren't around when records were big, so it can't be a nostalgia thing.
So is it novelty then?
It might be novelty. Like you were saying, the retro's kind of in right now. Like there is a lot of hipsters in the metal scene right now.
Well, you think rarity too, because you're right. A lot of people getting into metal were not around during the heyday of it, right?
Yeah.
And then vinyl does have some sort of sound. Like I inherited a whole huge collection of, I'm talking old 78s. They feel like Bakelite plastic big band from like World War II. And I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of cool to sit on the porch and sip some iced tea or something awesome and just listen to that. It does something to you. It means it makes you feel. So I don't know if that's a thing.
I wish I knew exactly. It's kind of a cool phenomenon though, really. Like it's such an old. It's one of the oldest mediums of recording music that we've had. So. It's just weird to see it make a comeback in the day of streaming. Is it maybe just a counterculture thing to how the music industry operates now? Maybe. The fact that bands are still recording on vinyl is pretty cool. It's amazing. Not very easy. Like I took 1 year of audio engineering, and we had to learn to record to vinyl and to magnetic tape. Unfortunately, we weren't able to record to vinyl. We did not have any of the equipment, at least available for the students to use.
So how are
we did learn the theory and the concept of that.
Okay.
We did end up recording to magnetic tape. That was actually fun, but very complicated. It made me appreciate how music used to be recorded.
Well, yeah.
We'll dive into that a little later.
Okay.
I could nerd out on music and like all that kind of stuff all day. But I want to talk about the history a little bit of at least the mediums because it ties into the industry. So at first they were recording on 2 cylinders that were vinyl. Mm-hmm. Same concept. It would, you'd make a little groove that the phonograph needle called the stylus would pick up on. I don't really want to get too far into exactly how that works. But it started out with cylinders, and somebody had this idea to just basically add more space that you could record onto to make longer tracks, I guess. Mm-hmm. So they had the idea of flattening it out, and that's where we got the vinyl record from instead of these cylinders. And for the longest time, records were the bee's knees, man. Like, all your grandma's jazz was on these vinyl records, like Elvis, all these rock and roll artists that were coming up at the time. Like, it made it so easy to actually produce the music.
It gave it portability.
Yes. And because record players became a lot cheaper over time, it wasn't just for professionals and like bars and stuff to have or whatever back then. So music became about personal consumption back then. Like before you had to go and actually see the bands. Before we were able to record any music, you had to go and like actually experience the performance.
It had to be live.
Yes.
There was no other option. And just think about those magnificent performances like Bach or somebody that we didn't get to hear. We have to go back and try to recreate, but we missed all that because we didn't have the ability to record anything.
I reflect on that a lot because it's so different nowadays, Tours are a lot bigger. A lot of the more popular artists would just go everywhere. But back then, the artists didn't go everywhere, They typically stuck to their general area. Sometimes they branched out if they were big enough.
Well, it depended on their patronage too, because most artists were supported by wealthy. Yeah. So they hung out in that circle.
Yeah, and it was all reliant on word of mouth to get around. Like, I saw this amazing performance by this guy over there with the harpsichord. or whatever, you know.
Like, get it.
And I think a lot of music started out on like the street culture too. Like you just go to the side of the road and start playing your music.
Yeah, folk
you got to get your name out there, and the more people like that liked your stuff, they're gonna spread the word. It eventually became viral. It was a lot slower than it is nowadays, yeah.
Yeah, now it can happen in a few days.
Yeah. Because remember, folks, the internet used to just be us talking to each other. Essentially, that's all we're doing. Our computers are talking to each other. That's what the internet is. It used to not be like that. You have to communicate with each other. And to get information from one side of the country or one side of the world to the other, it
had to be done in person, not with waves.
Yeah, exactly. And with music, you can't just write it down. You can transcribe it so other people can perform your music, but you cannot just write music down and experience it as music, you know?
Well, and other people performing what you can't convey your mood. Like you said, you can write it down, but the mood of the person playing the piece varies.
Yes.
You know, you could be an accomplished musician with perfect execution, and yet some guy on the street that's suffering heartbreak might put something into it that just makes it transcendent, which is why I like music.
Putting the history on pause a little bit, that's something I really do want to dive into, is how music portrays emotion. Mm-hmm. It's just fascinating to me personally.
Oh, no,
that something like just organized sound, that's the definition of music, organized sound. How that can just portray so much humanity through it, and we can pick up on that and put ourselves in that space that they were in when they wrote the piece. It's fascinating to me. From what I've seen and studied a little bit, it kind of works off the language center in your brain. Music is almost its own language, and it's universal. If I write a piece in a minor key, it feels sad. Mm-hmm. Universally across the globe, when you hear that piece, your brain will, for whatever reason, get into that sad mode just because of how those notes interact with each other.
Except for 5% of the population, you people with amusia, I'm really sorry. I actually do know someone, just to dive in here, that cannot recognize musical tones or reproduce them, and music is noise to them. And I can't even fathom, because music is a huge part of my life every day. I do chores with music in my ear.
Yeah.
If I want to get something done, I play a certain tempo of music. It's a huge part of my life. And can you imagine going through your life, this 5% of people that feel no emotion whatsoever? It would be the worst thing ever. And then it makes me wonder what they even feel emotion. Like, how do they do it?
It's sad to think about, because music is one of my big passions in life. I love it. I listen to it almost constantly. There's always some music playing in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I couldn't even imagine what that would be like, just to hear it as noise, you know?
Well, and that person that I know that has it, they don't like to be around people either, because I think everything that we emit is a sort of music. I know that might be getting a little too deep, but
yeah.
If you think about when you're in a group of people, it is a cadence. It is organized noise in a way, and people are taking turns talking. They're talking over each other, and it's sort of like this symphony of interaction. And I feel like maybe that their inability to recognize musical tones limits them to enjoy things. But maybe they enjoy stuff that we don't understand.
That's very possible, yeah. I mean, I would actually love to sit down and have a conversation with somebody like that, because I would love to just know what that's like in their shoes.
Yeah, like I said, only one person I've ever met.
Because our brains interpret music, you know, in a musical way, mm-hmm. There's no even way for us to fathom how exactly that feels.
I can't. It weirds me out, because music, I've been singing. Somebody threw me, and they gave me a solo piece. I started singing when I was a little kid, and I play by ear. I hear songs all the time in my head, and so that's how I learned to sing. And I've been performing in front of people my whole life, and actually I miss it now, because apparently when you're old, unless you become a professional musician, the opportunities to sing and play music, they do diminish. You get busy being an adult and stuff. So even though I have it in my ears all the time, I'm not making it. But then I noticed too, I read the other day that musicians have shorter lifespans than the general population. So maybe it's good that I'm not a musician. I don't know.
That can't be your typical musician, though. Like,
I think it's professional.
If I'm just sitting there jamming on my guitar in my living room my whole life, and maybe I'm one of those bedroom artists that records an entire album from my kitchen.
Well, and I think Skrillex. Some of it too is musicians. When they say musicians' lifespans are 25 years shorter, I think it's professional musicians. Yeah. And I also don't think it's from playing the music. I think it's from the stress of performing all the time. And then
it's got to be
stressful. The drug use had to be factored in there, because a lot of musicians die of drug overdoses, professional ones.
Yes.
More than the average population, I think. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe as a collected group, they have trouble with it.
I would love to, on my own time, research the numbers behind that, because I mean, drugs have always been associated with the culture of professional musicians.
Well,
it's
they
just the way
enlighten
it
creativity.
Is it because they can afford them, or is it because they're living the lifestyle on the road, and so the opportunities to party are just, more numerous for them?
Or is life for creative? I think super creative people are sometimes more in touch with their emotions, and I think that makes life harder in some ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
do they want to numb that sometimes, or bring it out?
That could be it. I think you're onto something there, because art is usually an expression of how the artist feels, and they want to portray that through. It doesn't matter if it's visual art or music or what have you, even video game design. With music, though, a lot of the artists are in pain. A lot of them experience mental health issues. Even look at Kanye West.
He totally broke this week, didn't he?
He breaks every other week, I think.
That's true.
That man is dealing with, some extreme mental problems, and he's talked about it openly a lot. But he's very, very successful. He's one of the most successful musical artists on the planet, almost in history. Superstardom status.
Yeah, he's just like the rest of us.
He's in a lot
bad
of pain.
brain days. Yeah.
And that's something music can do, is connect us to those superstars in a way that you can't otherwise. You can't just go shake their hand, but you can put yourself in their space by listening to their music, by experiencing their art.
So empathy through art. Yeah, because when you hear, I know there's like this huge research, like the popular, somebody called it prap, like emotional rap, where it's and it's just all pain.
Yeah.
I know that because I got a whole herd of teenagers. They listen to a lot of that, like Post Malone and.
That's big nowadays.
Is it Bazzy?
Bazzy.
Yeah, and sorry, Bazzy.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, if you can't tell, we're not really into the most popular music of today's age.
Well, I can't keep up with it.
I don't listen to like Post Malone or Lil Pump or whatever. I'm not too familiar with that whole scene.
I've heard a lot of it because I have to drive people places, and I surrender control of the radio to the peeps. Yeah. And so and that's where you brought up YouTube. We have a radio, and we even have Bluetooth capability in the car, so you can stream off of your phone. Yeah. The kids still stream YouTube through my car.
Oh, yeah.
For their playlists.
Exactly. That's, again, what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, I had to bring that up.
We'll get more into that again as we go through the history again, but...
we'll get back on track. We're not Ozzy's train.
I think this is going to be a longer episode. We might break this up into 2 parts. It just depends on how it goes, but there's a lot to get into here, so... but again, with the emotional part... it's weird with music. I think I guess I want to speak for everybody, but I shouldn't. But at least in my experience, it's easier to feel empathy with music than any other art form to me personally. Like I can't go look at a painting and understand how the artist felt or what they were trying to say, because again, I think all art is a language of some sort, but to me music is the one I understand the most. I don't know why. Maybe my brain's just wired for that. I'm not sure if it's just me, but with me, I can really connect with the artist by listening to the music that they create. That's the language I understand, and they're speaking that language very fluently to me. So,
well, and music is like they always say, it's a form of math, or it is a language. So maybe that also maybe is a universal language among humans. Because other than the 5% that I'm really sorry for you guys. Again, if someone has a museum out there, please comment, because I only know one person and their experience with it. I would like to know more about that, because 95% of people feeling things from music, and then you have this poor 5%, really, it's pretty universal. That's statistically most of humanity.
Yeah.
And I can go across the globe, and we can play music, and both of us will have a response. We might not have the same response, but like you said, if it's in a minor key, and it's this big, sweeping ballad, we're probably going to feel some sadness. Even if we don't understand the words, the music will elicit that.
Yeah, exactly. I've listened to music in other languages a lot. Mm-hmm. And you still feel kind of the emotional set that the artist was in, or at least they were trying to portray. Music doesn't have to be what you're feeling currently.
No.
It can just be what you want to say, just like visual art. And so you can just, because of just how it works, because how the organization of the notes interact with each other, you can really say anything emotionally through music, even if you're not feeling that way. It's usually a lot more powerful when you actually feel that way, though. For whatever reason, I think it has to do with the instrumentation, like how hard you're going to play the instrument, how soft you play a note, or how hard you play a note, and what order those notes in, as in the scale or the mode of the song. There's a lot of little factors in there that can really, just like your vocal inflections when you're speaking, Especially singers, obviously, you're going to be able to portray that too.
Well, yeah, I remember.
That's the instrument we're more used to using every day, our voice.
I don't speak Spanish, but I sang a song in Spanish one Easter Sunday, and it made people cry. And I think it was like you said, it was where I was projecting the notes, and I just wanted to sing the song to the best of my ability. And I think that comes through when you're performing, and that also probably goes into performance too. Like, what is your goal with the performance? And is it to make people feel things? Is it to show your art? Is it just to make money? And I think that you can sense that as a human based on where you're at. Because nowadays with music is largely about making money to a lot of people now.
Yeah. And almost the only way to monetize it in the current day and age is basically you have to be a spectacle anymore. I mean, it's no longer just put out a single. And we're like, you have to put on some kind of show. Like, look at all of the pop artists, man. They're kind of going above and beyond with their showmanship.
You have to be not a personality.
Not just in their live performances, but just in their entire aesthetic of their brand.
They have to be a brand instead of an artist.
It has to be a spectacle anymore because it has to stand out. Like, it's gone to the point where the entire industry is so flooded. If you don't stand out, you're going to be drowned.
And think how much we're missing of just amazing music, because we were talking about that earlier, that they have changed the order of pop songs just because you have to get that spectacle out there. You have to get that attention because people's attention spans are so short.
Yeah.
So they put the chorus in the front of the song now to get it, blasted open.
Yeah.
Instead of building.
Remember that, because we're really going to dive into that later.
Okay.
It's a huge part of the industry now. So I kind of want to segue back to the history just a bit.
We're going to steer back.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've kind of gone way off the rails.
Were we at cassette tapes?
We
were on vinyl.
Well, we did vinyl, yeah. So I was talking about vinyl and how that changed music. Because before it was either you had to see the performance or we had radio when vinyl was first coming out.
We did.
So a lot of music was played live through the radio. There was not really any way to record that off of the radio. We didn't have friggin' 1 terabyte hard drives to just to record everything on if we want to. We didn't have screen capturing computers, and so you had to listen to the radio, and it was constantly being broadcast. But you couldn't just take it home and listen to it on demand. Like, our entire culture now is about on demand.
Oh yeah.
So that's why I kind of wanted to talk about the history to see how we evolved into that.
Okay.
But with vinyl, or those vinyl discs, or the cylinders, I mean, there was a few weird little experimental mediums before, and they were just kind of clunky. Like, there was these wax cylinders they would record onto. Basically the same exact concept of how vinyl works, but it was done on wax, and it had this really complicated machine to record it, and just as complicated thing to listen to it. And it came out of this little cone instead of a speaker. They didn't have speakers back then.
Also, don't leave it in the sun.
Yeah. So like the sound wave itself would come off of the wax and be portrayed through this little cone.
Okay.
And it was really quiet. Like, so there's all these clunky mediums, but for whatever reason, this vinyl cylinder worked really well, and actually they came out with speakers. They were rudimentary. They don't work anything like they do now. The core concept of it was the same, but it was amplified through cones. That's what the phonograph was.
Okay.
Even with the earliest records, the vinyl records, it was amplified just through a cone by just the natural way sound works and travels through the cone and amplifies itself, spreads out. It's still very quiet and rudimentary sounding. Then they, improved upon the design of how the voice coil and the speaker worked, and they were able to design basically what we know as the speakers nowadays. They weren't quite as crisp and fresh back then, but they worked for what they were.
Basic idea.
Yeah.
Of the
So
sound. Okay.
we basically got way better record players, and that's when the sales of records just boomed, when it was cheap and sounded great in your living room. Okay. But they were all these big consoles at
huge.
the time. And the culture of music was like, it would be like you had the choice between your radio, the very early start of television broadcast,
or huge console,
which wasn't able to be recorded back then, by the way. And then you also had this huge console that you would play your music through, and you'd get 40 minutes per side of record or something.
Well, in the beginning, my old records just have one song on each.
Exactly, you'd get a song on each side, or it wasn't just music. They were recording like audio dramas, and like you can even get vinyls. I think they're hard to find now, but there's vinyls of like presidential speeches and stuff that you can get.
Oh, I totally want to listen to that.
Yeah, and but there's a sound to records. Like, it captured the aesthetic of music in the time.
Oh yeah.
Like, you think of old 50s music, and you're gonna think about that little crackle and sizzle of the record playing through the record player.
I actually really enjoy that sound.
Yeah, and the really the speakers had so much treble. They didn't have a lot of bass back then for some reason. They hadn't quite figured out that yet, and so there's just this aesthetic to it.
Well,
and
yeah.
you think about that when you think about 50s music. If you were to take one of the master copies of the records and digitalize it, fix it, and it just won't have that aesthetic. It'll still be the song. It'll still sound great. It'll still be a song. But it won't have that aesthetic of the time if you clean that up like that. It's got to really have all the elements.
Taking a little time travel seashell and holding it to your ear.
Exactly.
You're going to be lost in the 50s, literally. Or 60s. You're right.
Yeah.
Because things didn't really start changing until like the 70s, 80s. That's when we got kind of the next medium.
Yeah, exactly. That we're going to go into magnetic tape there with that. Before that, I want to get into again, we were talking about the aesthetics. So
sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay. So it really encapsulates the time period, those aesthetics of that music. It's weird how it can bring you back. I've always found that fascinating. Just like with smell, you go and smell like a fresh cut lawn, right? You're just walking. Let's say you take a walk around your neighborhood and someone just mowed their lawn, and you smell the fresh cut grass and the fumes from the lawnmower or whatever. It has a way of triggering these memories. Okay. Music is also very good at this. I can't sit here and tell you why. I'm not exactly an expert on psychology or especially with music, but I have experienced this so many times. I'll hear a song that, for whatever reason, brings me back to, I don't know if it's the first time I heard the song or the most memorable moment I heard the song. Whatever strong memory is associated with that song, or sometimes it's even just a feeling. Sometimes it's not even a memory. It's just a feeling that you get, not even just nostalgia. It's something on the background of nostalgia that, you get. It just brings you into it, just as you were experiencing it before. Music is also very good at that, and I don't know why. I'd love to look into that later, but
how it correlates with the memory center of your brain, or sensory, because it sounds like music is the ultimate time travel device.
It kind of is, yeah.
Even places you haven't been.
Yeah.
I'm having a picnic in 1930s.
Well, go listen to some music that was recorded in Brazil in the 40s. Okay.
Ooh.
Good luck finding it, by the way. But if you find it,
there's some
pop it in your new Sony record player, your newfangled freaking record player, and just listen to some older music from a different culture, and you can almost bring yourself into the zeitgeist of that time and that place. Or experience that paradigm of the artist that they were experiencing at the time.
That sounds like a fun... Well, my grandma, she had a record player. She had this really fancy Mitsubishi setup my grandpa ordered from Japan. And when I hear old country music, I think of baking cookies with my grandma. I can even smell them. We would make Christmas cookies, and she had these old, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers albums that she'd play that we'd do Christmas cookie baking with. And it gives me this comforting feeling. So I think I know exactly what you're talking about. When it brings, I can smell the cookies. I can hear my grandma laughing. She used to sing along. I mean, it was just a wonderful thing. And maybe that's what music does, is it encapsulates all the feelings we feel. Because it's not just good feelings. I mean, I have sad music for sad times, too.
There really is a music for every emotion that you can feel.
There is.
Your basic C major scale is going to just be your generic, happy, monotone music.
Katie Pull Weeds music?
Yeah, Katie Pull Weeds music.
Yeah, Katie Pull Weeds music,
And, you got your minor keys and your harmonic minor keys, and they're going to be two different types of sadnesses. One is more of a melancholy, and one is just straight sadness. And
I broke up with my boyfriend music.
Yeah, you can almost tell an entire story just with your piano, let's
True.
just say, for an example, or a guitar or whatever. But because you can just ignite these emotions in a certain order and tell a whole story. Just like the exact way writing a story with words, the structure of the story, how that plays with how you feel. You can do the same thing with music, and that's how film scoring works.
Is you have plot.
Yeah.
And then you have, here's the apex of the plot, the climax. This is happening. And Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
Without the music would not be as cool.
They can really... It's almost like a story behind a story, in a movie specifically, where you can just really feel... they're really trying to aim you in a certain way.
You feel
to
connected
feel a
with
certain
the
way.
story because of the music.
And not only is it a story in the background that isn't even the main movie, it's like a sub-story, but it also kind of enhances the movie itself story. It kind of pushes it along a little bit. Like, I can't even imagine a movie without music. There's been a couple little like, indie artsy films that don't have any music at all.
Yeah.
And they're just not the same. Like, they're great. Don't get me wrong. That I can see the vision and they executed it well. And that was the point of it. It's almost like you have to have a point to not put music in your movie.
You do.
But mainly all movies have some kind of music, even if it's just like a popular song of the time and they're playing it in a club that it's part of the scene. There's still music. It still says something.
It sets the scene. And I also don't, I think movies without music don't elicit the same emotion.
Yeah.
They don't. I think I hear music all the time in my head.
I do too, yeah.
Because I'm like, you have your own soundtrack.
Yeah.
I know I do, because I'm like, the earworm thing, it's always happening.
And sometimes even, without even knowing it, I think subconsciously your brain will even kind of write music to what's going on.
Especially people with, like, no one's brain is quiet, per se. If there is a person out there that doesn't hear things in their head all the time, I'd like to talk to you.
Yes.
Because my brain is going 100 miles a minute all the time. In fact,
Yes.
I get yelled at for it. Because while I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm thinking about other things. It's just kind of how I work.
Yeah.
It's getting better.
Sometimes I sing to myself in my head, like John Ralphio from Parks and Rec. I'll just just a little phrase pops into my head, but I'll have it in like a sing-songy voice in my head. And
Entertainment 720.
Yeah.
You do a little rap in your head, John Ralphio.
I'll be doing the dishes. I'll be like, put the plate in the washer.
Oh, I always do that.
Just for whatever reason, I don't know why. It's fun. Music is fun. Above all other things, it's fun. Even the saddest of songs.
Well, I think humans need fun. Our lives are so... Everybody's fighting right now. And I think music is something... Even when there were fights, like during the 60s, which was a great music time, the late 60s, during all the music got like a huge leap there.
Yeah.
New sounds came out. Tracks got really long. Like, you know, you have these songs that are 14 minutes long. That all happened... it was all recorded, I should say, in the late 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely wanted to touch on that too, because...
I did a good job.
Music has played a role in activism, specifically from what I see specifically, at least as a good example of this, the war in Vietnam. A lot of the activists against the war were popular musicians at the time. They were very liberal and were not for war at all. So they used their platform of being a popular music artist to speak to the masses about just warfare in general. There was a lot said. I can't sit here and we can go off the list. We can go down the list. There's a whole other podcast, even just specifically for that. But
just music and activism.
But basically, they were using their musical platform, how many people they were already reaching with their art, to just encapsulate their ideas about the war. And it actually swayed a lot of minds, like Woodstock. Man, everybody associates that big old concert they had, like Jimi Hendrix and all those artists back then. A lot of them were against the war, and they used the millions of people who were like listening to them to just say, hey, war is bad. There's a lot of songs about it. You can go back and listen to from that time period. It's amazing to me how powerful that was to sway people's ideologies.
Well, and just you can listen to a song from that time frame and you can instantly think of everything that was happening during that time frame. And I think that's the magic of music. It makes me wonder about now, but I think now we have too many... It's not too many genres, but now it's like everybody is wanting their own special pair of custom socks. And so music is the custom socks.
Stonk socks.
Back then you had country, classical. It was a little bit more of a condensed world, and it was mainly in the West. There was music in other parts of the world, but the West was popular culture, and it had more of a political force to it, I think. Yeah. I don't know. It just seems interesting.
It did, particularly in wartime.
Yeah, in wartime.
Yeah. And
we weren't obviously alive then, so I think about when I was a little kid... There was some anti-communist music in pop music, like Love Balloons and that what is that phenomenon has kept going. It's just maybe not as powerful as a whole as it was during that time. And people, I think, thirst for, like, the boomer generation thirsts for that glory days, because I notice there's a lot of them that are protesting now too. And I think that they missed that because it was a powerful emotional time.
That's true. We may dive in deeper to this later, but on that point...
We'll go back, yeah.
Well, on that point, there was a phenomenon in popular music around 2008, 2009, where America was in a recession. We had the big housing crisis. A lot of people were losing their jobs, losing their homes, losing their income. Rough times, pretty rough times. I mean, we've had worse. But at the time, in popular music, there was a shift at the very... It was extremely correlative to that.
Okay.
So all of a sudden the popular music was pulling us out of this funk we were having because of the zeitgeist.
Yep.
and it was all about like having fun. All this music about going to the club and dancing and having fun and just trying to kind of upbeat our mood a little bit.
Yeah,
and it was directly correlative. Yeah,
yeah.
You can tell, like, if you go listen to popular music pre 2008, it was your generic pop, you know, sex icons and all, and a little bit of hip hop and R&B was pretty popular back then. But then, bam, 2008, 2009, that's your summer dance hit, like, phenomenon that happened. Just all this electronic music, upbeat, really happy sounding club music just got really popular.
It really did.
Because we wanted an escape from the funk.
Well, and I think anytime you have bad cultural times, you tend to get these over the top, just feel good people. It really sucks right now, so let's have some fun. I think we're gonna have a lot of that because of the Rona. Like, I'm wondering what's gonna come out of that.
Yeah, maybe, but with the way the industry's going, I don't know. Everybody's just competing for clicks now, so
right now
it might not shift.
Music is really kind of morose.
Yeah.
It's like, well, or sometimes they'll have a poppy tune, but the words. I've been looking at the words a lot more because I never listen to the words. I'm one of those people that I'll sing the worst words along with the song if I like the tune, and then I go back and I'm all, oh.
No, I can attest to that.
I'm bad
with metal as my main course that I like. I can attest to that. A lot of the times I completely tune out vocals in songs because of that. Because I'm a guitar player, I'm very instrument oriented. I listen to mainly the guitar and the bass and the drums.
Instrumental metal is one of my favorite types of music.
Yeah, that's bigger than ever now too.
I don't need the vocals. Sometimes if I'm in like a screechingly horrible mood, yes, scream into my ear. But if I am wanting to be productive, in fact, I write a lot because I have my blog, and I will listen. You send me a lot of links. Yes. I like the instrumental metal is my favorite. And it doesn't just have to be one type of metal. I didn't realize how many genres of metal there were, which is another topic, but I like them all.
Yeah.
And I love there's a lot of technical ability needed in metal. People they've always wrote it off as this, they're just screaming. And it's like, no, listen to the guitar.
Yeah. Seriously.
Listen to that.
I mean, there is some bands that give it a bad name.
Yeah.
Again, this kind of the more gimmicky stuff,
or
the earlier like extreme metal when they were really trying to push the envelope. It's kind of hard to digest for your regular person. You have to kind of be a nerd about it to enjoy it, and there's a lot of those. Trust
metal
me.
Historian.
Yes. We could do an entire episode on just metal. I mean, come on. I don't know how many people really want to hear that, but we might do it.
We might go there. Well, I don't know. I think it's.
But that's my cup of tea again. So I'm probably going to reference mainly metal and rock a lot.
Okay.
Obviously there's a lot of other types of music, but with instrumental music, not just metal, but there's a lot of like your lo-fi hip hop going on to do your homework. There's a lot of this trap music and EDM. That. A lot of that's instrumental, you know, a few little vocals they throw in there to modulate and make it sound cool. Like Skrillex is famous for that. He kind of raised the bar on doing dubstep, but he would like record a woman saying something or take a sound bite of a movie or something, and he would modulate the one little phrase or voice into a complete song. But anyway, instrumental music is, I think, bigger than... I don't want to say bigger than ever. It used to only be instrumental music for a while. Do
you think that's because people always have music on now because of streaming and our devices? It's not like where you have to go walk and put a record in, or even a cassette or a CD, because I know we're going through history.
Yeah.
And, I know that, what was that? Pirating kind of started all that.
Yes, for the most part, pirating did.
Started a playlist thing and iPods. But since that has all come into our lives, now you have music. I usually do. I have it going most of the day.
Yeah.
If I'm,
And I've found myself more often listening to instrumental music because I'm having it playing in the background. And I need to be able to kind of pay attention to my surroundings, or, figure out what the kids are doing. And if I have like a death metal singer just blasting my eardrums out with his distorted vocals, it's going to be really hard to like focus on what the kids are doing while I'm doing the dishes.
When I'm out in the farm and I'm doing work, if I just have instrumental music, I can almost keep an eye out for, hey, is that cow going to run me over? Or, I'm picking weeds, but I need to be mindful that someone's going down the driveway. And that is where we come into, has it become background noise? That traumatizes me a little bit.
I don't want to say mainly, but a lot of it has, because I think there's a lot of factors to that. But one of the main factors is how easy it is to listen to music now. You just pull out your phone, open up your Spotify, and click a playlist. And we'll get into playlists later, because that's a big part of the industry.
You don't even have to think about that anymore. It does it for you.
That's a big part of the industry now is playlist culture. It's completely reshaped everything. But we'll dive into that deeper a little later.
Okay.
But for now, because it's so easy just to listen to music now, we can do it. We can have music playing no matter what we're doing anymore. Whether it's through your phone speaker, you pop into headphones. Raycon, shout out. Let's get a sponsor. Ooh. Everybody else has one. Come on. No, anyway.
I love what you did right there.
Your AirPods, your all this. The technology has really driven the industry forever, and that's why I wanted to get into the history of the mediums for a while. The technology really drives how even music is monetized, and it always has been, because what it costs to produce is directly correlative to what the artist is going to make per sale of the album or what have you.
So we've gone from toss a coin to your Witcher to get paid with Bitcoin?
Yes, exactly. Toss a Bitcoin to your Witcher.
Okay.
Internet of plenty.
Oh, Internet of plenty.
Yeah, it's amazing just how it's shifted. Let's get back into the history real quick.
Okay, I want to get through. We can do this.
I'm probably going to bring up a lot of topics more than once, but again, this is my passion, technically. So.
This is how I learn things, and plus I like talking about this because I think music touches, except for the 5%ers.
Yeah, sorry for you guys. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel bad. We'll do a different
Give
episode
us a shout out.
guys.
Seriously, I would really like to talk to you guys.
I want to talk to the Amusias. Okay, yeah, so history, we've went up through Vietnam, so we're getting closer to tapes.
Yeah, so we're still on records for a while, and then,
we went to 45s, which were much more portable.
Yes, you got your little smaller records and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
It made for the smaller record players, meaning you didn't have this giant console.
Take the
it was
little
a lot
box
more
to the
portable.
beach.
Yep, take the box to the beach, know. A lot of cool technology came out of this.
It really did.
One thing I have to bring up is, what was it called? Selectivision. Somebody at RCA had this idea to put full movies onto vinyl records, and that actually gave us a lot of cool technologies we still use to this day. I don't want to get too deep into that, but I just wanted to shout out to Selectivision because that was cool.
Plus the name's awesome.
It took so long. Yeah, the name is pretty awesome.
The name is awesome, yeah.
It took so long to produce Selectivision. To fine tune it and make the actual players. It wasn't cost effective. Okay. The players were cheap. They didn't, when it came out, it was right when VCRs were becoming big.
Okay. Early 80s?
Yeah, when it first came out, all we had were video cassette recorders to record TV.
Okay.
They weren't making movies onto the video cassette tapes yet.
No, you just
They weren't mass producing them. They actually started mass producing movies onto the vinyl discs called Selectivision that RCA made. But because everybody also was recording their TV shows, the cassette tapes became a lot cheaper to produce.
So mass adoption.
Yep, and that means more R&D money to the people who were making them. And then the VCR got cheaper because of it. Then we can get into this in another episode too, because then you got
history
your
Betamax. Media.
Yes, it's fun.
We'll do that one later.
I love this kind of stuff. I'm a nerd on this stuff.
No,
But shout out to Selectivision. Unfortunately, right around that time, not only were we getting the magnetic tapes for movies, we also were starting to record music onto magnetic tapes.
Do you think somewhere out there there's a Goonies Selectivision? Because
absolutely,
I might need that in my life.
Well, I don't know. When was the Goonies? That was an 80s movie, wasn't there?
It was pretty early, but you said around the time. So was Selectivision more late 70s?
That was early 70s, yeah.
So Rocky Horror Picture Show.
It was popular. It was popular up through the end of the 70s. Like Star Wars, the original Star Wars. That was what, 1977?
Yeah, so we could totally find that.
Yeah, that's a Selectivision movie. So yeah, or late 70s. I'm sure like the very early 80s. That's when it kind of stopped and it fell off, and they kept making Selectivision discs.
Okay.
Long after they stopped making the players themselves, because so many people had already bought the player. But again, it's just VCR technology got a lot cheaper, and
I remember.
And we got our VHS tapes that kind of won out.
And mass adoption equals cheaper production, which equals more profit. Which that's how that's going to work. Okay.
I love the free market capitalism model because we get better quality stuff for cheaper. It just evolves because of that over and over and over.
And the people get to decide what's worthy. I know there's an argument that it's manipulated. We could talk about that later. But honestly,
I'd love to put the tinfoil hat on.
I want a conspiracy. No,
we will talk about that too eventually.
Don't worry,
we'll
bring
we have a lot of topics we're gonna have complete episodes on.
We're never gonna run out of things to talk about.
Yeah, but
we found this out. Okay.
But luckily, because of free market capitalism, the just producing magnetic tape became a lot cheaper. They really refined the technology, and because of that, we started to record music onto these tapes. I think it started with the audio tracks on the video cassettes.
Well, yeah, and the reels,
Yeah,
magnetic
and
reels,
magnetic
were a
reels,
big deal.
yeah, for movies and stuff like that too. So it became pretty cheap to produce these cassette tapes that music was recorded onto, and so that just became the medium over time. Nobody wanted a big bulky record player anymore when you could just get your nice Sony boombox,
The Walkman,
your ghetto blaster,
and the Sony Walkman. Okay, I'm old enough because I'm stuck kind of between two generations. I'm technically a millennial,
yeah,
but I'm old enough. I made mixtapes. I loved them, and it was, you know, even when CDs came out, because that was mostly what was during my childhood was CDs. But we had tapes, and my dad had this cool leather box that had like Journey tapes in it,
yeah.
ZZ Top, and I loved that box. But I'm telling you, the bad thing about tapes, when one died, it was like you wanted to have a funeral, and you cannot fix that thing. Like, there were some hacks, but if a tape died, it was over.
It was over.
It was over, and
done with.
You know, when you lose your Journey tape, it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
And you got to buy a new one, and tapes were expensive.
Oh yeah, back then, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and back then you could buy a Hershey's candy bar for $0.25, so $10 for a tape. It was painful, but that's when I think artists made a lot more money back then. They don't.
Yeah, they
now.
were getting massive cuts of the actual sales of the albums they were putting out.
They totally had to.
By the way, real
okay.
quick quip. The reason they call them albums is because, again, vinyl records were very limited on the amount of time you could record onto them. Mm-hmm. So often, like, they would have to sell you a big book full of records called an album. So you'd put on one side of the record, it might have 2 songs on it. Towards the end of it, they got a little better at condensing the grooves and everything. So you could have maybe 2 or 3 songs on one side. You'd have to flip it over, listen to the other side, or when they invented the record changer, the automated record changer,
so cool.
They started doing direct sequences. So you'd have like side 1 and then side 6 on the bottom, and then it would, or like whatever. So basically, it made it so like the automation could put the disc on, and then you'd have to flip the whole stack over.
Oh yeah. My grandma's Mitsubishi was like a robot.
But they would have to sell them in these books called albums, and for whatever reason, that name for a compilation of songs stuck. So
I like it.
Even with cassettes.
It's an album now.
It's still called an album, even on your Spotify playlists.
On iTunes.
Yeah, you go and you look up an album, or new popular artist releases an album. For whatever reason, that's stuck, even though we don't have these albums full of records anymore. They resembled photo albums.
Did you have an album full of CDs and mixed CDs?
Yes, everybody had that.
I feel like we all did, right?
Yeah. Those were amazing. I can't wait to get into CDs.
Oh, when you started burning discs, life changed.
I can't wait to dive into that.
Okay, we're up to tapes.
Yeah, but we'll dive deep into CDs, because that's kind of really where the evolution of today's music really kicked off. Mm-hmm. It was pretty stagnant and everything back when tapes were going on. So, and again, going back to aesthetics, tapes had their own little aesthetic of the late 70s, early 80s.
Total culture too.
Yeah. And even just the sound of the medium. Each different music medium has a different sound to it, and magnetic tapes are extremely recognizable sound. I don't know what it is. There's a warmth to it. You get a little bit more bass out of it.
Well, there's a huge hipster subculture of people with just not just tapes, but reel-to-reel tapes. They said the sound, and maybe that's a craving for some sort of real thing, authentic thing, because you don't get that. I love being able to just get on my phone and listen to whatever music I feel like listening to, and I'm old enough to remember when that was not an option, or you had to listen for an hour of radio to hear this one song. Now you can just make a playlist, bam, you got it.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. I don't think people should rag on it. It's super cool.
It is super cool.
Yeah.
But having a thing is great. We still, luckily, right now, they're still producing CDs. I don't know how much longer that's going to last. I don't think very long. CDs.
I haven't listened to one for years.
It's still so cheap to make a CD. That's the thing. Like, we're talking pennies. Like, because of mass production, it's like it really only costs the distributors pennies on the dollar to make the CD. You know, we're talking, a few more pennies to throw it in a plastic case with some artwork.
But who's listening to it? Because I haven't listened.
Yeah, okay, now nobody's buying CD players. Full disclosure,
I haven't listened to a CD for years now.
Me neither.
I have a huge drawer full of them because I won't get rid of anything that's music.
I still have I have an album of CD somewhere around here.
I have mine are all in cases.
My car.
So yeah, well, because some people just gave them to me when I was younger too. So then I'm wondering, well.
It's because of the evolution of technology. Because now you can go buy at Walmart, $10, you plug into your cigarette lighter in your car, and Bluetooth.
Well, that's
so your
true.
phone can now just communicate with no matter what stereo you have, as long as you have a radio and a cigarette lighter.
Adapter.
You don't have to have those weird tape adapters with the plug on it. You don't have to have a CD anymore.
And we went from tape. We went from tape to digital in like light speed as far as history went.
It really evolved quickly. So yeah, tapes almost didn't even last a decade.
They didn't.
Almost.
It was like the 80s.
They held on quite hard though, because as they started producing CDs, they were still mass producing tapes alongside them. You could actually have the option, just like when DVDs first came out, you could still buy the video cassette of some of the movies and the DVD.
Yeah, and same thing happened in the early 90s. I remember being able to take a CD I bought when I was a little kid and make mixtapes with all my CDs. And you still did that because you didn't have that ability like you do with your phone where you just throw songs into a playlist. And that came at the later part of the 90s with Napster.
Yeah. The cool thing about tapes, though, tapes started the playlist culture, realistically. This was the early...
Was it.
You could make mixtapes.
I had them.
By recording... Okay. It got complicated, but it was a cool little hobbyist kind of thing where, okay, maybe you were listening to the radio and you, my favorite song was you cut off the first half of the song trying to get the tape in and hit record.
Everybody became sound engineers.
But you'd use a tape, and then you'd cue it up, and then when you hear the next song you wanted to put on your mixtape, you'd hit record again. So you had this medley of songs you liked from the radio.
Everything took so much longer.
Yeah. Just like VCR started out with just recording the TV, tapes did the same thing. You could record off the radio. Well, they realized this was madly popular, so they made the double tape recorder.
Yes.
That's where this started. You put in one tape in one side, and there right next to it was another slot for another tape.
And you hit record.
So you could buy a tape from the music store or from any a lot of stores distributed them.
Or borrow your friends.
Yeah, so here's where pirating really started. That's where it
started.
I had to build up to it slowly, but
pirating
really started with cassette tapes.
It really did, and VCRs.
You could essentially just borrow a tape from a friend, pop it in one side, and put a blank tape, which were pretty cheap. They weren't right away cheap, but they got cheaper. But realistically, it was cheaper than buying a already produced cassette tape. So you'd pop it in and record from one tape to the other tape, and then the technology evolved with it to be able to instead of, because you used to have to flip the tape around because it was double-sided magnetic tape.
They make ones that flip it automatically.
But they made the heads that moves to the other side and essentially recorded it backwards. Instead of being able to rotate the head, it would actually just record backwards.
It just went the other direction. I had one like that.
Thank you, microchips. That was...
Well, and I have an anecdotal thing about this. In the 80s, when I was little tiny, my grandpa had a satellite dish. He spent like $4,000. That's like spending 20 now, okay? Yeah. You didn't have to pay to get the feeds. Papa had HBO. He had all these things. So then he also got a VCR, and we recorded The Empire Strikes. That's when it all started.
Yep, pirating really,
because
with magnetic tape, whether it's cassette or VHS.
You just knew where to line up your satellite. You could get Showtime, you could get HBO, you could watch all these movies that were still in theaters by and large. Yeah. And they didn't have, it's like they didn't catch up with the people for a while. And so that was, I remember that. I remember watching, and then I have one grandparent that recorded so many hours of TV. He ended up with like 3,000 or 5,000 VHS tapes in his garage.
Holy moly.
And then he thought they were worth something. And it's like, no, Papa, that ship has sailed. And to get rid of that, and thousands of tapes. And then he did the same thing with movies on disc. So he had this huge catalog. And by the time he caught up with all that, then we had moved to the next part, which was streaming. So it's funny how people do that. I don't know. Archiving. I guess there's archiving among us. Sorry, I didn't mean to divert, but it was just, you talked about pirating. We all
archive something.
We do.
We really do.
And you talked about pirating, and it really did, I think, start picking up steam in the 80s with VCRs and cassette tapes.
Yes. Pirating really kind of started, especially with recording your TV shows. Yes. That was a really big thing. There were many debates in Congress whether it should be legal or not.
Yeah.
Because of intellectual property rights, copyright, all this other stuff. Congress shut it down every time. They're like, you guys are already making so much money.
Yeah, you're getting ad revenue.
Let people record. It's not a big deal. So thankfully, we were able to keep our VHSs. And nobody was really distributing pirated content back then. You could let your friend borrow a recorded TV show.
They kind of came and watched it with you together because people hung out a lot.
Eventually, that evolved into a whole black market thing and whatever. But especially with DVDs, we don't need to get into movie media right now.
No,
We're mainly talking about music.
We can talk about that later. We do movie episode later.
But particularly in music, pirating really started with making mixtapes from the radio or borrowing tapes, and people would just give them out. that's how a lot of bands got famous. I want to say particularly Metallica. It was a really good way to get your music out. It was to make all these bootleg copies, give them to your friends, and your friends would just start giving them out to record to. Now, the more tapes you record on, the more the music degrades.
The quality
so
sucks.
it wasn't uncommon to get this horrible version of like one of the more popular cassettes that were out there. So everybody had like a real crappy version on tape.
Version on tape.
Yeah, everybody had these blank tapes laying around that are like 5th generation recording.
Listen to my bootleg Inner Sandman type
bootlegging,
thing. Okay,
bootlegging was huge in music back then.
Okay. I remember.
So yeah, it was kind of amazing.
First time I heard Weezer was on a mixtape.
Yeah, and so the kind of mood behind pirating really stuck around after that because nobody wanted to pay well, not nobody, but there was a lot of people who didn't want to pay full price for the cassette.
But
so
if
they
you
just borrow it, make their own. It would be really easy. So if one person buys it, so that started peer-to-peer sharing, which was really what kicked off the internet pirating thing, or like Napster and like you had LimeWire and BearShare. We'll get into that a little later after CDs.
Yeah, we're in CD realm right now. But CD pirating was easier once you had your little computer and you could write it.
Yeah.
It was a little easier.
There was a buffer for a while because not everybody had the burning technology on their computer with CDs.
It was not easily acquirable.
It was not easy to write onto CDs.
And it took forever.
So for a little bit there, you couldn't bootleg with CDs when CDs first came out.
You would just record it to a tape and give it to your friends.
Yeah, that was easy. Actually,
did.
yeah, because you could take your Walkman CD player, the little portable CD player ran on AA's, and plug that into. There was an auxiliary port on your tape deck, on your boombox.
Yep.
And you could record from your auxiliary port.
Or you could just, if your boombox had, a lot of them had the 2 tape players and the CD in the top.
Yep.
And the radio, and you could just record everything to tapes. So tapes hung out for a while.
Tapes, they hang on. CDs were out for quite a while.
Until about the late 90s.
Yeah, but they actually produced tapes up until about the early 90s.
And I think they're going to bring them back.
Yeah, you can actually still, most recording studios that actually still record to magnetic tape for a master. There's something about there's something about it. But I forgot to completely go into the aesthetic of tape with tapes and music culture. There was an aesthetic to that music. There was something raw about it. You had small little distortions of the sound. This is particularly noticeable on VHS sound. For whatever reason, you had the magnetic tracking. It's something to do with the way tracking worked on the magnetic tapes. It created this aesthetic. And that's making a comeback in vaporwave and synthwave. They really add. It's artificial because there's all these cool filters you can do on like your DAWs and all that. But vaporwave is becoming huge for whatever reason. The nostalgia probably. But I think a lot of us really liked that raw sound. It didn't sound very... Like, nowadays, music is so refined.
Crisp.
They sit there and pull all the little silences out, and all the little impurities. You can really edit them out. We do it all the time here doing the podcast.
I just think nothing beats when a tape has been pulled out, and then you rewind it back in, and then you play it again. It's like, that's special.
Tapes were the original fidget spinner. You should just sit there and wind the tape from one side to the other with your finger. I did it all the time. It's fun.
Sitting in the truck waiting for your mom.
Yeah. I remember the first tape I completely destroyed. Just pull all the tape out because I wanted to see how long it was. It was
I just remember it would never sound right again after you put it back in, even if you just took your time. But yet there was something magical about that, like you're talking about. There's not only the recording distortions, but then the idea of it, the physical distortions.
Exactly.
Makes you think of simpler things.
Now here comes CDs into the mix. So
I thought CDs were amazing.
I think somebody was trying to take the concept of a record and basically turn it towards the digital age. And because it really works very similarly. Like the laser reads little pits and valleys in the plastic disc that was burned in by another laser.
Yep.
And it became pretty cheap to make the discs, and it became pretty cheap to print on the disc because you actually make a metal, just like with vinyl, you make a metal master made of, I think it's usually some kind of cheap steel or something. Yeah. And it has the pits and valleys on there.
And then just burn.
And it presses the vinyl, or the plastic disc on there. And then they cover it up with a reflective film. And it's all this cool little process. But over the years, it became cheaper to actually make the discs and mass produce them and sell them in big
And it happened pretty fast.
A lot of us still have these like recordable discs sitting there in a spool.
Yeah, I've got a stack
you have 100
somewhere.
of them. Yeah.
Well, because we leapt so fast from recording discs to just streaming. Like there, you don't even need to keep a physical form of anything anymore. That was a huge leap, and we'll talk about that later. But
exactly, yeah. But with discs, like you could hold so much data on these little discs, and they were way smaller than records. Portable. They were much more portable and convenient than the tapes, because we were all getting tired of like, you have to have all the tape. You have to rewind the tape. Yeah.
Oh, the biggest thing for me, I can still remember the first time I listened to a CD. The single greatest thing is you could hit the button and skip through songs. That was huge. You did not have to the fast forwarding took forever or rewinding.
Oh yeah, there was no time code stamped into the magnetic tape.
And there was a repeat button.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but the repeat button was freaking huge because you could listen to the same. Like, say you really like the song. I know we all do this. Mm-hmm. I can listen to the same song if I'm digging it for like 35 times and not get tired of it. It's like I have to burn it in my brain, kind of like you burn into a CD. And then I'm good. Yeah. But that repeat button and being able to skip, it changed everything.
I loved the repeat button.
Oh, repeat.
And it was huge for hip hop.
Shuffle.
That being able to do that kind of stuff was huge for hip hop.
Yeah.
And kind of really shifted how they sampled beats and stuff for that. I don't want to get too far into that. That's a whole other episode
genres.
If we want.
Yeah, I could go there too.
Yeah. But yeah, the digital age of music really changed that scene a lot because of how you could just make cooler samples. I mean,
you could.
Before then it was scratching records and you were able to do that, but you were still pretty limited on like
when you could
just because of the nature of how a record works. You can't just pick up the needle, move it exactly. You can't see where you're doing on there.
No.
But with the digital discs, with the CDs, the compact discs,
you could loop it.
There was time codes recorded into that's how your CD player found the track. It would read a time code. It was subdata that was recorded into each little segment of time. So all of a sudden, it was a lot more convenient to listen to music. So we kind of phased out tapes pretty quickly.
They did. Just
the features of being able to skip tracks, repeat.
Well, once everybody mass adopted desktop computers and the internet, and then you could make mixed CDs, then tapes just evaporated. I didn't see.
I think that's exactly when tapes stopped.
Yeah.
It was way more convenient to bootleg CDs.
And that was the late '90s. Yeah. I remember they just kind of
time.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Like
with tapes, how it worked is like you'd have all the tapes spooled up on one side. And to either record or play the tape, it would actually have to move the spool to move the tape along a spinning head, spinning magnetic head.
Yeah.
And so it was just inconvenient. We got real tired of it. It took too long, and the cassettes themselves took up a lot of space on shelves.
Do you notice this theme with us? It's gratification and convenience. Those are like the things that make humans go boom.
That's what pushes all technology.
Yeah.
Just like Moore's law, where computer processors get more powerful and smaller at an exponential or logarithmic rate. The same thing happened with music mediums. So all of a sudden, discs were flat and small and a lot more fit on the shelves of stores and stuff like that.
Well, yeah.
And it was a lot faster and easier to actually produce and get the songs on there.
Yeah. And now you don't even have to store them on your devices. You just have to have the RAM to play it.
Exactly. And because of the increased storage size on the medium, all of a sudden the music quality shot up on what you could get. Like with tapes, you were pretty limited on because of space. You couldn't make it the highest fidelity in the world. Now with digital music, you could, essentially have like as high a fidelity as you can imagine, up to where the human ear couldn't even like tell the difference.
Oh, the crispness
of
music.
So HD music really came out of the digital age. And there's still a special place for digital music. I love it. It's all digital now, and it sounds great. It's very pure and very like all the impurities are taken out. So now you basically have to artificially add in the raw sound of like tape distortions or record scratches.
Go to grandma's house.
Or go to grandma's house, and
there's something more human to me about impurities. I like mistakes. Okay, like no, I don't necessarily like mistakes, but you know what I mean. Sometimes you like to listen to more a raw, more earthy thing. When you're in the mood for it. And then other times, because most of my music listening is done via my phone, over my headphones, and it's digital.
Yep.
So there's no mistakes. But I feel like sometimes things can be overproduced.
Oh, for sure.
And like, where's the scream of the lady getting murdered in Roller Coaster of Love? There's these things.
Oh, man. So memes. Memes were,
You miss out on memes when things are overproduced. Yeah. Well, and I notice you're right. People are adding it in just to have some interest in their performances.
Yeah, to touch that nostalgia bone or whatever,
Yeah. Well, and to give something to your fans, because now you have to be a brand. Yes. Instead of just being an artist. And I think we made that leap when we went into digital music.
Exactly, because back then it was more about like, honestly, a lot of bands didn't care as much about record sales or cassette sales or whatever.
It was about
the live performance. Yeah. It was a little bit about the brand. It wasn't as important to sell merch back then. That's why how come you don't just see like a million Elvis shirts still around?
One arena show would make just this catastrophic amount of money for them too.
Yeah, like the Beatles weren't making money selling t-shirts. They were making money selling the albums, so they had more time to focus on their live performance, which is really what sold the albums anyway.
And they made money that way, whereas now artists have to be... Well, I think it's
now
like
you have to have merch, and you have to put on this extravagant show for like $100 tickets and sell out an arena to make any money.
Yeah,
it's insane because like you don't make money from the ticket sales. You make a tiny little cut. You make a tiny little cut of the bar if you're one of the more adult artists. You make a tiny little cut of the record sale, and I mean really tiny cut of the CD sales now.
Scary.
You make fractions of a penny for streaming. Like per stream.
So you've got to get in front of people now as more of a performer than an artist.
So now you really have to up your performance game in order to sell merch. So you have to be... It's not even almost about the performance anymore. It's about the merch.
And it's like that not just in music. Like as an author, they expect you now to have a social... Like you used to be able to submit a manuscript, get a... a publisher would say, yeah, I'm going to publish your book. Yeah. And they would do a lot of that work. Now you're expected to have social media followers. You're supposed to have a persona.
Yeah.
You are the brand. And now I don't know, I feel like that hurts music in some ways. But then in other ways, it's given us this huge platform to discover all of these amazing things. So
yeah.
Do you think people are finding ways around it? Like,
just a little bit. I mean, the more popular artists are... I don't know. It's a weird industry now.
Even they look like androids.
Even the more popular artists are losing a lot of money from this.
And that bothers me.
And we should be thankful. We should feel lucky that they are still doing it. Especially indie artists, because now it's easier than ever to download Audacity or Reaper or any of these free DAWs, or even pay like $100 and get a pretty decent one, and just record music in your bedroom. A lot of metal bands do that now. Periphery, shout out to Periphery.
Ooh.
They released their entire first album just home recorded, didn't have to pay a producer. They did it all in their bedroom. So now you can really produce high fidelity music in your bedroom for cheap, for free if you really want to, if you have the instruments already.
So there's more choice, but people are making less money traditionally. So
yes.
now it's a new way.
Yeah. So now a lot of artists are doing it just to do it and not to make money.
I think that's a wonderful way of doing
but,
art.
But if you do become popular, you still make a little bit of money.
Yeah.
But you have to have exorbitant amounts of streams to make the kind of money that like Drake or Kanye West or like Post Malone is making.
Well, yeah, because they only make 0.004 cents per play.
Yes.
That's nothing.
Yes.
That would take millions
now,
of
granted, that's just on one streaming service. So if they are also, like, let's say that's Spotify's going rate.
Yeah, that is.
They're also getting a fraction of a cent per Google Play. They're also getting a fraction of a cent per iTunes. YouTube monetization. If somebody does happen to use your music in a compilation video, you will get royalties because of how YouTube's terms of service are set up for copyright things.
Oh.
So they'll take ad revenue from that video that used your music, whether or not they had permission. YouTube will go in and grab most, if not all, of that ad revenue from the ads that play in that video and give it to the artist who actually wrote that. So if you make a compilation without permission of 10 different artists, don't expect to get monetized, even if you have the most views of anybody in history.
Because
they will take all of that and distribute it to those artists. So artists are still making money from the ad revenue on YouTube.
Well, I think they should. I mean, they're the ones that made the music. You just threw it together. It's not like it's pretty easy to make a compilation now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But a lot of music now is recorded out of passion again. So we're back on that.
Well, that might be a good thing.
So it almost shifted back into passion.
So
it's a hobby now almost to just release your music, because a lot of artists go in knowing they're not going to make anything. If you're good, if your craft is good, you might make enough to maybe pay for a new instrument or something. It's really hard to make a living anymore in that industry unless you're really going on tour and that's your entire life on the road, putting out those concerts, selling those t-shirts, selling those Yeezys.
Do you think that's maybe a leftover from another age, though? Because I think you said it seems like pop music is more about the spectacle now and the branding of the spectacle. And I don't even know. I wonder sometimes the artists that do that, they've got to put some of themselves into that because they get, but it seems you've got these huge divergence in music where you have the people that know they're not going to make any money, but they're doing it anyways because they love it. And then you have the more packaged,
the cult of personality,
Lucky Charms of music, you know, where it's this branded, cult of personality, where people still follow it and people still love it and they still talk about it like they know these people. Whereas I think you could actually literally know the indie band you talked about, where you could literally talk to them.
Exactly.
I don't know. I think it's amazing. We live in an amazing time.
Yeah.
Really, for that part, for music, anyways.
A lot has changed, even in just the last 10 years. Like when I was like I said, I was a guitar player in some metal bands. And both of the bands we were in, we did record a little demo, and it was really expensive. We had to pay a producer. Like, DAWs were not as easy to get. If you could get them, your computer could not run them. Computer technology has evolved
just in
vastly.
10 years.
They've become much cheaper to get a computer that can run even Pro Tools. Like Pro Tools is the development of these DAWs has gotten to a point where most computers can run them because they've written the code so condensed that it's not going to take a lot of resources.
DAW for people that don't
know? I'm sorry, jargon. A DAW is a digital audio workstation.
There we go.
It's basically just a recording studio that's on your computer.
But because computing power has increased so much in the last 2 decades, that you're basically saying that your own home computer probably could run the DAW.
Back when I was in a band, and this was only like 2008.
Which was not that long ago.
Not that long ago, really.
Years.
I mean, it's been a decade, actually. Wow, I feel old.
No, it's okay. We all do. Okay.
But just a decade ago, computers kind of sucked. They were awesome for browsing MySpace, right?
Ooh,
or getting on Google and looking up song lyrics or something. You could do a lot on computers back then. But as far as digital audio recording, no. It was really hard. You had to buy basically a supercomputer and then buy a $1,000 piece of software. And hopefully your computer ran it, and then a year later your computer sucked, and the DAW became more advanced and released an update, and then your computer couldn't run it anymore, and you had to buy a whole new computer. It was really expensive, so only these giant recording studios were able to record digital music cheaply.
So it was kind of a monopoly in a way.
Yeah.
So basically, you're saying that just in a decade, you've been going from having to rent expensive studio time to you can make it at home.
Yes.
I mean, that has happened.
Now if I wanted to, I don't even have to have a band. I could actually modulate all of the different instruments. I don't even have to have a guitar anymore.
See,
I could write it all with MIDI, and MIDI is just a digital synthesization of music.
Like GarageBand.
And it's gotten really good. And it's hard to tell the difference between real instruments and fake instruments now, or real instruments and synthesized instruments now.
Well, and I have. Okay, this is probably overshare, but I'll take baths and I'll listen to music, and it's my music time, and I'll go through and listen to. I'll sometimes just get on the top chart and just kind of listen to everything, kind of gist it, and it's not just top of one type of genre. It's just the top download musics or top 100. Mm-hmm. And I'm almost overwhelmed by the amount of music there is right now, and the different types, and I pride myself in being able to keep up with things a lot because I'm a librarian, but music is blowing my mind. I can't even fathom the sheer volume of it. Well, what genre is that? Is that toenail gaze? I don't know.
It's all amalgamating into just one genre almost.
It's just one big group of organized noise.
And I don't know what's the exact factors in that. It could be, my hypothesis is between being able to stream and the market being flooded completely because of how easy it is to record music now. We all have a musical voice now. You can download Audacity. That's the program we use. Shout out, by the way.
We love Audacity.
I love Audacity. This is the DAW we use to record the podcast. You can download that. You can buy a $10 cord on Amazon.
True.
Thank God for the 21st century.
And it'll be here.
Products on demand. So you can get a $10-$20 cord on Amazon to plug a guitar, any instrument, into your computer and start recording music. Really easy. It's really only a matter of time now, not difficulty.
Well, that's something that I think we're all in short supply of because of the constant assault of stuff. Mm-hmm. We talked about that little negativity episode, but just we are constantly do this. I suffer from it terribly because and I think that affects creativity. I think if we could be locked in a room with instruments and food and the internet, magic could happen. But that's not happening to a lot of people because you have all these demands of society on you too.
Yeah.
Different tangent, sorry, but
that's okay.
I feel like that might be affecting. So what you're saying though is we almost have music inflation, kind of like with money. When you flood them, when it's music inflation, and some of it's crap and some of it's awesome, and you have to weed through the weeds to find anything. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's that's a big contributing factor to the devaluation of music, particularly in how you monetize
too much
it.
Of something devalues
for streams.
it. Yeah. So how?
It's kind of crazy, like how we're gonna dive deep probably in the next episode. It looks like it's gonna become a 2-parter. We're already at an hour, I think. So,
oh yeah,
we're probably gonna wrap up this episode. In the next episode, we're gonna be talking in depth about like how piracy changed the entire industry and culture of music. I'm sorry we weren't able to cover all the topics we wanted to dive into in one episode. This is such a big topic.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to go on. Well, yeah. Because the next one too, we haven't even got into streaming and background noise and how music has changed just in one decade. So exactly. I know we're gonna go there.
Really, we've only covered like a brief history of like mediums up to CDs, and it really changes from here. So we're going to leave you on a cliffhanger, I think, here, guys.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, that was a good episode.
I liked it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. At the end of each episode, I like to end by eating chips in the microphone for 3 minutes.
Where's the guacamole? Today's chip sauce comes from the Good News Network. The British Academy of Sound Therapy has found that music takes 13 minutes to release sadness and 9 to make you happy, says a new study. And I won't go into the details of it because it's cool if you just go read it. We'll link it in the comments. But honestly, it goes in perfectly, it correlates perfectly with what we talked about today. What do you think, Brady?
Yep, sounds great.
Alrighty, y'all have a good day.
Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like our content, and tune in next week for our continuation on this conversation about music. And make sure you smash that like button.